Hello, good evening, all my international people. This is Louise Uachu broadcasting live from Vancouver. We are March 1st, 2012, and this is 5 p.m. Western Time. So, March 1st, 2012, the show today is called America Made in China. When's the last time that you bought something made in America? When's the last time that you see anything in your living room that's not made in China? We are living in North America, and almost everything is made in China, and yet we hear of a possible war between America and the East, which means China. So we're wondering, where are people going to get their materialistic needs fulfilled? Because it's a really materialistic society, and everything that's material is being made in China. So if we kill the Chinese, if we attack the Chinese, what's going to happen? Very interesting show. We have with us Mr. James Hout, and he is an author and a speaker. He's very interesting, and he will speak to you about his experience with China. So let's not bore you any longer. Let's bring him in.
Good afternoon,
Hello.
Louise.
How are you, Mr. Hout? Hi, James. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Very nice having you on the show. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
So this is a very interesting topic, and like we were saying to our listeners, you have been to China and you have written very interesting things that we will get into, but we want to start with your experience as an American with China.
Yes. Well, I love China and I love the Chinese, and if I had to say one thing about them, it's they love the American dream. That's what they want out of life, is just what we want out of life.
They have been sold on the American dream.
Oh yes. Their country calls themselves communist, but the Chinese people are capitalists at heart. Wow.
Now, is this something new, or is this something of influence, of Western influence? Because it cannot be, if they are capitalists at heart, like you're saying, it cannot be just from watching Hollywood and watching the West in the past few years.
No, I think it's in their DNA. I think they're entrepreneurs and manufacturing people and salespeople. I think that's their heritage. I think they're coming from some terrible events in their history, and that's how they got the government they have. But I think the individual is a capitalist.
So this idea, really, when we say he's a capitalist, what we mean is that the individual is dependent on his work in order to succeed and advance in life.
Yes. I first went to China in 1991, and there were big changes going on. And I remember they'd given the farmers in the rural areas the right to grow their own crops, and their crop production skyrocketed. And they just had these little tiny plots, maybe 15 feet by 15 feet, and they're out there with sharp sticks. But man, oh man, they made a huge difference in their productivity just because they finally gave the Chinese peasant the right to get ahead in life. And that's the American dream. If you work hard, you're going to do well.
That's a very interesting concept, because you wonder, how come the Chinese peasant does not have the access to his land? Because usually the land belongs to those who occupy it, and this is what all these revolutions are based on, a fight for land, right?
Yes, that harkens back to Mao's Great Leap Forward, where they communalized all of the land and gee, I think between 1959 and 1961, 30 million people died, and it was just a disaster. And now I think the government of China, they see the what they used to call the bourgeois way, the capitalist way, has a great effect on production. I think they want to guide it. Unlike us, I think they would like to guide it and try to keep things fair for everybody. But there's no doubt that if you think you can get rich, you're going to work those extra hours.
Oh, you definitely will. Now, what do you think is this phenomenon of made in China? Do you have anything that's not made in China nowadays? Everything in America is made in China now.
Yeah, everything you pick up, my Chinese friends, when we go shopping, everything we pick up, we look at the label, and it's a matter of great pride to them.
It is?
The ones living here. Oh, yes. They love to see that everything's made there. Unfortunately, I think there's some issues with the way some of the things are made. You've heard the stories about the I guess they call it sweatshop type manufacturing techniques, and that goes hand in hand with capitalism. It happened in New York in the heyday of the garment industry, where they had the young girls working in the tenement factories. It's just part of the development of a capitalist society. And I think, as time goes on, they're getting more like us and we're getting more like them. We just need to keep our senses so we don't wind up in a war with one another before we're the same thing.
Exactly. And that's where all this brings us. Now, what happens when you go to war with a country that makes everything?
Yeah, well, if you went to war with them, which I certainly hope would never happen, certainly if we do have a war with them, I think it wouldn't be because they attacked us. But if you go to war with somebody, the chances are you're not going to be importing their goods, so we would have to get it from somewhere else. And right now the world is changing. Even now, the manufacturing in China, because the government has been growing and the economic situation has been getting better, they even can't afford to manufacture things in China themselves, so they farm out they outsource their work to places like the Philippines and Indonesia now. So the products might soon be saying made in Vietnam, made in Indonesia, rather than made in China.
Are Americans ever going to go to work?
Boy, I know there's a lot of Americans that sure would like to.
You cannot be crying about unemployment and still buying everything made in everywhere else but America.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the Walmart effect. We all want the bargain. We all want the cheapest thing we can get. And that means we have to find someone who will do it for less. And, although, you can look at the American auto industry nowadays, and it seems like they're doing really well. They just had record numbers came out today, 15.6 million units. And so they're starting to come back. It's just a matter of staying on it.
The cars are not made in China?
No. No. Matter of fact, the people don't realize the number one selling car in China is a Buick.
Wow.
Yeah,
the number one selling car in China is a Buick. Is that because of Tiger Woods?
I don't think so. It's a relatively big car. GM does really well over there. It's a relatively big car. It's I think they make it there, but it's a Buick, and so it's kind of it's good for us. But I think that's the only thing that kept GM afloat during the dark days. And it's funny. I always liked the Jeep Cherokee, and you can still buy a brand new Jeep Cherokee like 1995 over there. They keep making the same one over and over again.
Oh wow!
But, yeah, they are very good at making duplicates of whatever we can produce, and they can make it cheaper.
See, that's a very interesting part. That's what we want to get into and understand their culture. does this mean that they don't have any creativity of their own? They're just there waiting for other people to be creative, and then all they do is just duplicate?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that they don't have the creativity. I don't know in their society if that creativity is rewarded as it is here, and that may make them want to be an engineer rather than an artist, say.
Mm.
But no, I've met some very creative Chinese, and man, when I was in the 90s, I was there. I was working as a chemical engineer, and every place we'd go, I was welcomed as the expert, and I would be talking to a room full of PhD chemical engineers, and I'm thinking, these folks are much more intelligent than I am,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't have a role that was gave them the authority to do things. So it's interesting.
Is that because of the oppressive political system? What exactly is it that imprisons their creativity and turns very smart and intelligent people into just imitators?
Yeah, I couldn't say. I don't know that they're just imitators. I think what they, after the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution in the 60s, I think they wanted to catch up, and the quickest way to catch up is to do things the way a successful country does things. Same thing in American football. You'll see them copy the winning team the next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
rather than the government trying to stifle their creativity. Now, China, let's face it, they're a one-party system, and they don't suffer dissidents very easily, and I think that goes back to the hard days of 30 million people starving. Will definitely make you want to toe the line.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some dissident artists there now that are jailed just because they disagree with the government. So it's not all perfect there.
Mm-hmm.
But they're certainly a lot better off than they were when the foreign powers had them cut up like a piece of pie.
Mm-hmm. Because they have been able to unite their country, which is like a continental land, and be able
Yes.
to have one bloc, one country, one people, one voice.
Yes. You can say many bad things about Mao Zedong, and I would agree with most of them, but the one thing that he did was, through war, he united the country, much as their first emperor did, and once you unite the country, you can stop the war, and then you can move on to governing. Unfortunately, Mao Zedong was not a very good governor.
Yeah, it's always the best generals are never the best rulers,
No.
because you need a general in times of war, and you need a ruler in times of peace and ruling.
Right. And the smart generals, like even Schwarzkopf, when they're done with their war making, they fade away. They don't try to become a politician.
They don't even know how to be at peace.
Although you can, oh man, we could go down that road. I could talk about guys like MacArthur, who they were all politics. But back to China.
Mm-hmm. Back to China, something that you told me earlier when we were speaking in the pre-interview that was interesting is the Chinese culture. So the Chinese culture, you were saying that they are fundamentally a peaceful people.
I believe that. I believe that, you just look at their history. You can go back hundreds and hundreds of years, and a few border clashes aside, they have never had war, internally. They had civil wars and battles back and forth, but never a war of aggression to their neighbor. You might bring up Korea, where they invaded into another country, but they were terrified that the Americans were coming right up to their border, and they just couldn't allow that. But yeah, I believe they're peaceful people. Their history shows they're peaceful people. You know, in what was it like in the late 1300s, they sent the Grand Fleet out before all of the ships of Spain and Portugal and all came and colonized the New World. The Chinese sent out a huge fleet. It was like 100 ships and 20,000 men, and they sailed all around, all the way to India and even over to Saudi Arabia, and they decided, well, there's nothing out there for us. Everything is better at home, and they went back home and they burned their ships. They really had no desire to conquer anyone, and I still don't believe they do. I think there's a lot of concern in the news about the Chinese have increased their military spending over the last 20 years significantly. But I think it's more in response and out of fear. You know, they still have very, very fresh memories of the Japanese invasion, which was terrible for them. And, you know, I don't think any Chinese person would say they hate the Japanese, but from what I've seen from the outside, it looks an awful lot like hate to me. But they fear
it always
them
looks like they have this certain rivalry or enmity between the Chinese and the Japanese, like a really something deep between the two of them that just can't make them friends or something.
Yeah. Well, you know, they were very vicious to them in World War II, and the Chinese have very long memories. And when I was working over there and selling engineering contracts, if everything was equal between me and a Japanese competitor, the American company would get the business. And everything wasn't equal and the Japanese were much better, the Americans would still get the business because the Chinese just didn't want it. They did a lot of business with them, they still do, but they do it reluctantly. And I think, you know, on the military spending, what Americans don't realize is until 2008, Japan spent more on their military than the Chinese. And Japan's not even allowed to have an army. So I don't know how they do it, how they spend that money, but the military spending increases in China are coming from a very, very, very low level. So they might look big in percent terms, and certainly they're now spending, they're second to us in military spending, but a far, far, far second behind us. And I think it's more a matter of, you know, making sure that they don't get invaded again. They're terrified of that.
They're just making sure that if anyone invades them, they would be able to adequately defend themselves.
I believe that. And I think, you know, a lot of the economic growth and the resistance to dissidents comes from their memory of the great famines. They had something like 1,800 famines from 100 BC to, you know, the 1800s. They had every 6 months somebody was starving to death in some part of the nation. So they and maybe misguidedly they think that they have to keep a firm hand on control so that they don't wind up starving. Those are the two things, the two big fears I think that drive them in all things. The need to make sure everybody is fed and the need to keep foreign invaders out.
This is a very interesting way of looking at things because it has also been reported that the Chinese were buying a lot of African land in order to farm there, but take all the food to China in order to feed the Chinese. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. But you know, it doesn't surprise me. They're buying oil companies too. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know about the export of the land. No, of the food. I really haven't heard anything about that.
Now, you said something that was interesting, that the Chinese don't have ambitions to conquer the world, that they went out there and they decided, oh, actually we have a beautiful land, let's stick to that one. Now, do you think that's something that will ever happen with America?
Oh, I don't know. You know, when we were getting ready for this interview, I actually went on Wikipedia and I looked up how many wars America has been in since World War II, since 1941, and it's over 140 intrusions into other countries. And China, you know, other than when we came right up to their border in the Korean War, or when the British from India invaded from the south, or the Vietnamese, you know, border conflicts, they just don't seem to have the interest. It seems like they have their hands full with just managing the 1.4 billion people and making sure everybody has a job and everybody has the wherewithal to be clothed and fed.
Uh-huh. Oh, so, you know, what do you think then is, because America was conquered by the Europeans, so which means that the Europeans were not satisfied with their own continent, went off to conquer the world. But then after conquering America, they're still invading other countries out there in the world. I mean, is there something, do you think it has something to do with the spirit? They can't ever see the beauty in themselves, in their own land. What exactly would you say it is?
I don't know, but it certainly it seems to be more of a Western thing. You could make a case that the Mongols in the 1200s, you know, they conquered most of Europe and Asia, and they came from that part of the world. But it sure appears that they got tired of it and gave it up. Matter of fact, there's some evidence that they were the ones that went into Tibet and became Buddhists and settled down and rejected all of that. I don't know if it's because their culture is so old. I get the feeling sometimes that they think of us as the rowdy teenage kid, you know, the 200-year-old country, and we're the rowdy teenage kid that's always wanting his own way and ready to fight at a drop of a hat. And they're kind of the old grandpa. You know, yeah, right. You know, we can do it this way, and we won't have to get in any trouble doing it. But you know, that may be too deep a question for me to answer.
Very, very, very interesting way of seeing things. The grandpa and the teenage who does not know, who just fights and fights and fights, and hopefully will learn by growing up further. Now you have two interesting books that I see on your site, which is jameshouts.com, jamesjhouts.com.
Thank you. Yeah, the first book is interesting. It's very topical in the year 2012, with everybody thinking it's the end of the world. It's basically a apocalyptic story that I wrote when I was very young, and then my editor, when she found out that what it was about, she said, "Well, that's happening now." Matter of fact, the story is very similar to the Arab Spring. There's a war in the Middle East, and most of the part of the book happens in Libya, in the Tibesti Highlands of Libya, and there's a biological war in Israel and this and that. And it's a pretty exciting book. It's kind of a Tom Clancy type book, and a lot of people like it. Then there's my most recent book that was published last November. It's called Carnival of Cannibals, and it's about Americans in a modern, highly technological world trying to function and trying to stay human and defend themselves from the risks of that technological society.
Now, let's start from the first book, which is Spirit of Era.
Yes.
Now, how old were you when you wrote this, when you first wrote this?
I was in my early 20s.
Okay. So had you read a little bit about the history of Egypt, Israel, the Middle East, and all these places that you're writing about? Had you been there?
I had read quite a bit about it. The book, actually the story started as a short story because at the time I was a research chemist. And I realized that the technology exists. My bachelor's degree was in biochemistry, and the technology existed even then that a good research lab could invent a disease that everyone in the world would get the flu, and only a specific subset of the species, say if you were Irish American or if you were Mexican American or whatever, they could target you. And in the book, they target the Jewish people through the use of Tay-Sachs syndrome and a virus. And so that's where the story developed, was that I just wanted to have that out, that was, and now I'm sure that the several governments have biological weapons of that type, but to make the story whole, I weaved a political story around it where there is a pirate bloc that is trying to take that technology back, and it's Russians and Americans and everyone, and they work together to blow up the lab where that biological weaponry was being manufactured, and also to take back the nuclear weapons from Israel. And then after they did all of that, they surrendered, and all was well.
Wow. Whew. Well, I hope it's not going to happen anytime soon, or I hope it's already happened and we didn't hear about it. Now, you wrote this because you're a chemist, a biologist, and you knew that this is possible. This is something that exists. They can actually make a chemical weapon that targets, let's say, Jews or black people or just Mexicans, and those would be the only people that die.
Well, you know, that I finished that book in 1979, and I believe the technology was at hand then, and that was an awful long time ago, and there's been an awful lot more biochemistry discovered since then. So I think if you were evil enough and you had the resources of a nation, you probably could do it.
Mm. Now, why are the Jews the targets in your story? Are you Jewish? No. I've always been fascinated with Israel and thought that they were a very, for being a tiny country, they always seem to put up a good fight. And since the Tay-Sachs, which is a disease that is primarily in populations with Jewish ancestry, it was an easy way for me to tie the biochemistry together with a political intrigue. Mm. I like. But how does one determine who's Jewish, though? Because at the same time, it's a religion which is confused with the ethnics and all those things. So it could be a little difficult to define who is Jewish.
Yes, and that's why I selected Tay-Sachs syndrome. It's primarily a disease of people with Jewish ancestry. You could do the same thing with sickle cell anemia. Mm-hmm. The reason nowadays they know the entire genotype of a human being, so it's not as important to use a disease like that to write your novel. But those diseases, the genetics was fairly well known even in those days. And my premise was that since they knew the genes and they could identify the genes, then they could use that to identify who would be the ones susceptible to the disease.
Now, so the people who say that AIDS was made in a lab and, injected into people for extermination and genocide of those people, these people who are saying that are not crazy.
Well, I don't know if they're crazy or not. I would say that in my opinion that was not the case. That it wasn't made in a lab, but anything is possible.
Mhm. Okay. That's wow. Well, I guess you have to not be afraid of dying, and then you wouldn't have to worry about these things. How how do you sleep at night?
It would be such a good story that I couldn't write.
Uh-huh.
So,
So
so then,
have you been to these areas, Libya, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East?
no, no. When my job in the 90s, I used to go around the world once every quarter, and there was another guy who took care of that part of the world. I did go down to Ivory Coast. I built a power plant in Ivory Coast, which was quite an adventure. But,
When was
no, there was. I'm sorry.
When was the Ivory Coast trip?
Oh, it was probably 1999.
1999. Huh. How is Ivory Coast? I've always wanted to go.
It was an adventure for an American. If you'd like to hear a story, I came from Paris, and I was traveling so much, and I flew business class that Air France upgraded me to first class, and I'm in a suit, china plates, and champagne glasses, and it lands on the tarmac at about 10 p.m. at night, and you walk down the stairs, and it's just, my goodness. There's just these soldiers with berets and machine guns, and they selected me immediately and took me in the back, and I didn't know why they were after me. And so they asked for my health card, and I've had every inoculation known to man, but I never bring the health card with me. And they said, well, you're going to have to take the yellow fever shot. And I said, no, because in those days there was no one in Ivory Coast between, say, 35 and 25 and 45. They had all died from AIDS already. That whole swath of the population was gone, and it was rampant, running rampant through the population. And these guys in this lab had this dirty old needle, and I'm going, oh, my goodness, they're going to kill me with AIDS. And then the light bulb went off, and I asked them, how much is the shot? And he says, $10, and I gave him the $10, and I was in. And then everybody that was in line behind me just gave him the $10 and got into the country.
So then you got sick and you got diseases and you will not be able to be protected, and it's crazy.
Yeah, well, I'd already had the yellow fever shot. And I think
you don't want to have two of them.
Oh, no, and it wouldn't have been effective, and also a dirty needle in a country like that is probably not the best answer. But they just wanted their $10, and I wasn't following along well enough to know that, they probably were thinking, why doesn't this guy get it? We don't really want to give him the shot either. And that's why they picked me. I looked like I knew what I was doing, but I guess I wasn't as big a world traveler as what I thought.
I see. Now, so there is no Ivory Coast in your stories, though. The whole chemical, diabolical, scientific thing.
No, not in that. But there's another manuscript that I have called The Expatriate, and it hasn't been published yet. And it's way back in the schedule. In 2012, I'm going to publish two books. One's a book of short stories, and one is actually a nonfiction about the stock market, because I trade the stock market every morning and do well with it. And then in 2013, I have a story about World War II, my dad's generation. And then I'm going to write I hope to write a novel in Chinese. And to do that, I'm going to go back to Beijing and take some more language lessons.
Wow. I mean, I thought I was busy, but you.
Well,
you do speak Mandarin already because of your experience in China, and
Yes,
right?
I started learning while I was there, but I think I learned more here after I came home than I learned there. I've been conscientious to try it. I went to a college, and I have friends that helped me, and I had a girlfriend that we lived together for several years, and the deal was that we always spoke Mandarin in the house, which was good for me, but not good for her English skills.
I see.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. It's a very, very interesting language, and it's kind of handy. I was in Rome one time, and I was wandering around Rome drinking strong coffee and strong brandy, and I got lost, and I couldn't find my way back to the hotel, but I found a Chinese restaurant and asked them how to get back in Chinese, and they helped me out.
That's really nice. Now, do you think that Mandarin is a language that's going to take more and more importance? Is this something that you're suggesting to the rest of Americans since they're in this relationship for a while to pick up the language?
You know, internationally, the language of business is English, and you can pretty much go anywhere and do business in English anywhere. But I felt that it was only polite to try to get through the first few minutes of a meeting using the customer's language, and and I think they appreciated it there. I probably sounded terrible. I think I still do. I think I have a very poor accent, but they appreciate the effort.
They certainly do. People like it when you communicate to them in their own language. They're a little bit more open. Now, how do you go
so
from
many
being...
Chinese speak English, though.
Yeah, very nicely. Yeah, but unless, of course, you're bargaining for a price.
Yeah.
This is something that I experience very often when you go to the to buy something as a Chinese. You know, they don't speak to you if the price is advantageous to them. You know.
Convenient amnesia.
Yeah, they don't speak English all of a sudden. You know, and then.
Yeah, although some places, you know, in China, you know, they have so many ethnic people there. There's probably 70 languages spoken in China. You go to Shanghai, they speak Shanghaise, and here you speak another one, and there another one. Although Mandarin, which comes from Beijing, it's the language of those people, is the official language everywhere, and it's been simplified, simpler than what it is in Taiwan. Still, there are many people in China who don't speak Mandarin. I can remember being in Hong Kong one time in a car with a guy from mainland China and a guy from Hong Kong, and I had to translate to the taxi driver, you know, because the mainland guy couldn't talk to the taxi driver. And he didn't speak English, and so I was like, man, what is wrong with this picture? I'm using English to translate between two Chinese folks.
Wow. Huh.
And we actually made it to where we were going.
That's really funny. I can see how you became a writer. You know, all those stories are way too interesting to be left into an engineer's mind. So how do you? That was the question that I was going to ask you. How do you transit? How do you go from being an engineer to being a writer? You know, it's two separate things. How do you go from trading to being a writer? How do you go from, you know, these other things, the oil companies?
That is a very perceptive question, and it's been a problem my whole life. When I'm in left brain mode, then I'm a chemist or a stock trader or an engineer. And then when I flip over to the right brain mode and I'm an artist, then I'm a writer. I can't seem to do the two at the same time. And when I had I almost said 40-hour-a-week job, but they never are that. When I was working as an engineer, I would start reading on a Friday night, and by Sunday afternoon, I could flip the brain over and start doing something creative. But then Monday would come along, you know. But now I have my time. I work in the mornings, and I don't try to trade when I'm writing because I just lose money.
Exactly. I mean, doesn't one kill the other? If you can you be good at both?
I think other people can do it. I can't. I can't do it at the same time. I have to make a break, and sometimes it's inconvenient. You know, when the stock market is going up and I want to be trading and I'm writing, I don't dare get in because I just make the wrong move. And vice versa, when I want to do some writing and I'm in the left brain mode and I'm trading every day and I have some writing I need to be doing, and I just can't get started doing it.
Mm-hmm. But so what is it going to take for you to pick one?
Oh, I don't think I'll ever pick one. I think I have those two sides pretty well developed, and it's just it's. I think one thing I learned in China is patience. Everything will come if you're just patient. Patience.
And you don't have to pick one, anyways, right? Can you can do both at different times?
Yeah, exactly. And I would love to be able to say that I get up early in the morning and I trade the stock market, and 1:00 the market closes, and I have some lunch and I start doing my creative work, but it just doesn't work that way.
Don't you wish it was working like that?
Well, yeah, okay. That would be good, but it might be pretty draining.
Yeah, doesn't that age you faster?
I don't know. I hope not.
Or maybe you learned some staying young stuff from the Chinese.
I think it can be harder on my close friends than it is on me. But no, I didn't learn any secrets from the Chinese about staying young. I think they just stay young. I think they just have the genetics to get old and look good the whole time doing it. But for me, I take it as it comes. I have, like I said, I have another manuscript. The Expatriate is a giant manuscript, and I need to edit it. And it seems like more and more I'm doing more editing than I am creative writing, and the editing goes well with the stock market trading.
Yeah, because it doesn't require that much thinking and creating.
Yeah, or that much scotch either.
I thought you're from California. Aren't people smoking in California?
Oh, I don't know about that, but I know it's a well-known story about writers that alcohol and creative writing go hand in hand. There was Saul Bellows. They asked him when he was old. They said, "Are you going to write another book?" And he says, "I don't think my body can take it." Oh, that's a tangent I didn't want to get on.
Oh, well, it's part of writing. I know exactly what you're talking about, and people love it. People love writers. The end product is what matters. Anyway.
Yeah, my most recent book, Carnival of Cannibals. There's a lot of excess in the book because I wanted to show the modern technological world, and the female character is from a farm, and she wants everything technological. She's going to go to med school. She's very technological. And the male character starts off as a nuclear engineer, and he gets contaminated in a nuclear accident, and so he rejects all technology. And then they fall in love, and thereby lies the tale. But she becomes involved in drugs. And I'm trying to say that her contamination with drugs is just another facet of our modern world, as his contamination with nuclear energy was. And then they fall in love, and they all go down to New Orleans for Mardi Gras, and thereby lies the tale.
Very, very nice. Carnival of Cannibals. Now, cannibals is usually people who eat people?
Yes, and in the story there are many, many characters, and I was inspired by Vanity Fair, the novel Vanity Fair, where there was just so many good characters, and I wanted to have these characters. But these characters in Carnival of Cannibals, they're not that good people. They are all taking advantage of one another, and the female character, Jerry, everyone is trying to get their bite out of her. And so that's why the name Carnival of Cannibals. It started off just being carnival, and then
so she's the carnival, and they are the cannibals.
No, they actually go down to Carnival in New Orleans.
Oh,
and the whole book is a carnival of characters, but they're bad people. They're people trying to take this from her or that from her, and I thought it was they all are at Carnival, and all of these people are cannibals in their own way. So
I hear what you're saying. Now, what does pastoral novel means?
Well, during the Industrial Revolution in England, the pastoral novel was the dominant genre, and it was stories about people going back to the country because the cities were so dirty and smoggy and industrialized, and the life was so terrible that the escape, they didn't have TV or the internet. The escape was to read these pastoral novels about the rich people out in the countryside, or Treasure Island, where they go to an island and it's this beautiful pastoral island where they just live without any technology. And this book, Carnival Cannibals, is the same sort of book. It's talking about our life in a technological world, and has it damaged us, and how do we function within those boundaries of technology?
Now, do you think that's where we're headed? Are people going back to the pastoral life?
I don't think we ever can. I think we all dream about going to that beautiful mountain cabin or some deserted island, but we want to bring our iPhones and our Facebook and our Twitter, and I just don't see us ever going back, and I don't know that it would be a good thing if we went back, but certainly there are dangers in a technological society that didn't exist before.
Because we had a guest on our show the other day, and they were saying that the nations which are technologically advanced have actually started losing some of their wisdom, a lot of their wisdom. That these people who don't have advancement in technology are really, really wise. Is that something that you experience in China or in the rest of the places that you have been to?
I haven't experienced it, but I have heard about it. I've heard that they say that our children are losing their attention span. Because everything is so quick and so short and so instantaneously gratifying that they don't have the attention span to stay on a problem as long as is necessary. And so I think there's that danger as well. As far as the technology in China, like I said, I was there very early on before many foreigners got there. And when I first got there, their cell phone service and their cell phone equipment was so far superior to what you could get in the United States that I was astounded. I came back, I was working out of Philadelphia, and I came back with a laptop and a phone that I could plug into it and get on the internet or get onto our intranet. And everyone in our corporate headquarters was saying, "How are you doing that?" And I said, "Everybody does it in China." and it was because our telecom companies had all of these landlines, and they didn't want to let us make the transition until they could suck every penny out of us that they could.
So there was, in your experience, there was more technology in China, and still they were wise? They were still the grandfather that you're talking about?
Well, I'm talking about the young people. They are real techies. The young people are very techies. They love the iPhones, and they love everything new. And they love America, and they love Americans. And, back to this question of China and war, I was in Beijing the day that the U.S. bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade.
Ouch.
And one day, they loved us. There was nothing we could do wrong. They loved our clothes. They loved our music. They loved everything. And the next day, they were out in the streets because, it's pretty, I believe that we bombed them deliberately because they wouldn't do as we desired. And, and that was a long time ago. That was 1999, and their military budget has skyrocketed since then. But you have to ask yourself, what would we do if the Chinese bombed our embassy in Philippines or our embassy in Thailand? It would be war.
It
so
would definitely be.
They're more deliberate, and and I don't know, maybe they didn't think that they had a military big enough to say anything more than what they did. Then maybe that's why they're building up.
But do you think that's what it takes, though? Because, I mean, nobody attacks America, but America keeps attacking everybody. So what if everybody decided to attack America just to teach it the lesson of not attacking everyone?
Oh, gee, you can make the point that they attacked us on 9/11, and then you could follow that up with a long discussion on why. And I believe the reason is, as they stated, the people who did it stated that the reason was we had our military stationed in Saudi Arabia, and now they're not. Mm-hmm. But so you have to take them at their word. But I don't know that everybody attacking us is a good thing. I think America is good for the world. I think we just need to tone it down a little.
Mm-hmm. Why can't America just be good for itself and stay in America? I mean, everyone is good for the world.
I don't know. I think a lot goes back to, if you remember, our President Eisenhower, in his farewell speech, he warned us of this. He warned us of an economy that was based on the military-industrial complex. And as long as our economy is based on that, there's always going to be someone here that wants to go use that stuff.
Yes, I totally remember that. And I don't like it when politicians talk about what's wrong when they're leaving office. What or point. They leave office, they become humanitarians. They leave office and then they start talking about, why don't they do that when they're in office? They're really smart people, and they know while they're in office what's really going on.
Well, I think Eisenhower fought it for 8 years. He saw it, and he did what he could. And, of course, he was a general, so he probably didn't do as much as someone else would. But he noticed it, and he worked against it as president. And then when he was leaving, he made the speech to let us know what was going on. And I think now, there's so much of our economy based on it. And, there was a book written during the Cold War in the 70s, I think, that said that the Cold War was not good for the economy because we're spending all our money on nuclear weapons, but you can't use them. And if you can't use the nuclear weapons, there's no consumption, and so you don't have to build more. So it's not good for the economy. And thereby lies all of the smaller wars.
And maybe people are just looking for an opportunity to use their nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Korea, I think, has shown me, at any rate, that the only way to be assured that you're not going to get bombed by someone stronger than you, and I'll not name names on that, is to have a nuclear weapon. The minute Korea showed they had a nuclear weapon, it was a different kind of politics with them. Mm-hmm. And everybody now is very upset about Iran getting a nuclear weapon, but let's face it, if you're that kind of country, that size of country, the only sure insurance you have to keep America from bombing you is to have a nuclear weapon. So they're all trying to get it. And so I don't know what the answer is. A world full of nuclear weapons is not a good world.
Definitely not. Let me just know the day that they're going to explode everyone so I can pray, and then we'll see each other in the next world.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Now, I thank you very much for being on the show. Where can people find your information, your books, and are you giving talks? Are you touring?
I have given a few talks. I haven't got on a tour because I'm still writing. I'm trying to get 2 books out this year. Mm-hmm. But, I would be interested. Some of the book clubs, these smaller book clubs that people have asked me to come and give a short talk and sign some books, and that's a lot of fun for everyone involved, and so I'm open for that. People can find me at my website, and they can leave a message there, and I will respond. And my website is jamesjhouts.com, and if they want to buy the book, they can buy the books there. If you want to buy paperbacks, you can go to Amazon.com and buy the books there. If you want hardbacks, you have to go to my site because it comes from a different publisher. But yes, if they would like me to come give them a talk, I just leave an email on the website and I'll answer you back.
Yeah, they will definitely do that. It's James J. Houts, JAMES J. Houts HOUTS.com. Now, so what is what are your aspirations, or what are you hoping for the future? What can you leave with our listeners, because the show is coming to an end? What can you leave to our listeners about China? Because everybody talks about it without really having there, and the relationship between China and America and the rest of the world. And what can you say?
Well, I think to say on a subject, I would go back to that the Chinese love and desire the American dream, just as we do.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, there was a funny story when Geithner went over there after the big crash in 2008. They asked him, "What are you going to do now that this laissez-faire free market system has failed?" So they want the American dream as well.
Uh-huh.
And also, the policy, the governmental policy of China is what they call China's peaceful rise, which means they want to industrialize, they want to be wealthy, they want everything that we want, and they have no desire to threaten us. They did a big study, and they know that countries that advance that quickly can be threatening to other countries, the countries that are already strong. And it usually winds up in war. And they understand that, and they have a hands-off policy in many areas of the world that we probably wouldn't. In the Spratly Islands, there's a big discussion about who owns these islands because it's suspected that there's oil there. And they just keep their hands off. In southern Tibet, they're trying to be real hands-off there. They know that it's threatening to us. And my statement to the American people would be, don't worry. They don't have aspirations to take us over. And really, if they wanted to, they could probably just buy us.
Okay, so don't fear the Chinese. Just accept to be bought, and all will be fine.
Well, I don't think they really want to own us, but I don't think there's anything to fear. And I think that if we would step down on this imaginary conflict, I think they would respond in kind. I think they are our natural ally. They still remember that we helped them in World War II, and they really like us. If we give them a chance, they could be our strongest ally.
I think everybody likes America. This is the problem. I think maybe it's just America that doesn't like America, because everybody likes America. But, you keep going out there to kill other people, they're not going to like you anymore.
Yeah, it definitely leaves a foul taste in your mouth when you're afraid of being bombed.
Fear, fear, fear. Fear. So this is what fear has done to America and what fear has done to the world. So we could say that then, America is the most scared country on the planet then. All you do is out of fear. All these things.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point with fear as a political tool in America. It seems that our politicians use fear to keep us in line. As long as we're afraid, as long as we have an enemy that they can claim as an enemy, then they can keep us in line and do the things they want to do. If we didn't have that fear, they wouldn't be able to manipulate us as much as they do.
That is excellently said, and this is a great way to end the show. Thank you so much, James, for being with us, and thank you all the listeners for tuning in. Do not be afraid. There's nothing happening. All is beautiful, right?
I'll be
How
back
do you
when
say
the stock
it in
market book is
Mandarin?
out.
Yes, please do.
Okay, thanks again.
Have a great evening.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, everyone, all my international people, for tuning in. You have heard for yourself. Do not be scared. There's nothing happening. Have a great evening. This is Louise Uwachu speaking to you from the You and I talk show in Vancouver.